Our lesson today is to be able to find equivalent forms of fractions, decimals, and percents. What do we mean by a percent? A percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. The symbol for percent looks like this. You can write percent as a fraction with a denominator of 100. So if I look at the word percent and an example 45 out of 100, 45 out of 100. Well, 45 out of 100 is 45% because the word percent means out of 100. So 45 out of 100 would be the same as 45%. If you have a square that's divided into 100 smaller squares, 45 out of the 100 smaller squares are shaded in, right? That represents 45%. Continue. Okay, so let's start with our first example. All right, we want to be able to express a part of a whole as a fraction and as a percent. So if I start with 72 out of 100 cats are long-haired cats, what percent of the cats are long-haired cats? The word percent means out of 100. So if we have 72 out of 100, that is the same as 72%. The word percent means out of 100. 72 out of 100 is the same as 72%. Suppose if we have a fruit display of 50 apples. 43 of the apples are green. What percent of the apples are green? Well, now we have 43 out of 50. And if I want to know what percent is 43 out of 50, one way we can do that is to make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. I make that equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100 by multiplying the denominator of 50 by 2. To make an equivalent fraction, we have to multiply the numerator by 2 as well. So 43 times 2 is going to give us 86. So we're saying 43 out of 50 is the same as 86 out of 100. 86 out of 100 is the same as 86%. Let's look at our next example. Of the 2,000 people at a concert, 240 are teachers. The rest are students. What percent of the people at the concert are students? Well, the first thing we have to do is find out how many people at the concert are students. So if we had 2,000 people at the concert and 240 of them are teachers, we would subtract those two numbers to find how many students were at the concert. 0 from 0 is 0. I can't subtract. I borrow and rename. Borrow and rename. 10 take away 4 is 6. 9 minus 2 is 7. And we have 1. So there's 1,760 students at the concert. Okay? Well, now I want to know, well, what percent of the people at the concert are students? Well, 1,760 students out of the 2,000 people. All right. I want to know, well, let's see. Let's simplify that a bit. Right? Let's simplify that by dividing by 10. Right? So I eliminate a 0 in the numerator, 0 in the denominator by dividing by 10 over 10. And now that's going to give me 176 over 200. 176 over 200, we want to make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100 because the word percent means out of 100. So to go from 200 to 100 and make that equivalent fraction, we have to divide by 2. So the numerator of 176, we also have to divide by 2. So I go to the side of my paper and I take 2 into 176. Let's see. 8 times 2 is 16. Subtract, I get get 1, bring down the 6. 8 times 2 is 16. Subtract, I get 0. So we have 176 out of 200 is the same as 88 out of 100, which is 88% were students. All right, so these first 3 examples, we're trying to make equivalent fractions with a denominator of 100, right? The first example, right, was pretty easy, right? 72 out of 100, we already have a denominator of 100, 72%. The second example, we have a denominator of 50. 50 times 2 is 100, so the numerator times 2 is 86. Once we have the number out of 100, that's the same as the percent. The third example was a little tougher. We had to first find the number of students, and then find the number of students, how many of them out of the total number of people. Simplify that to a denominator of 100, we get 88%. Okay, let's look at our next example. Okay, out of 25 chairs, 14 are brown. What percent of the chairs are brown? We start with our first fraction. 14 out of 25, right, are brown. I want to know how many out of 100 are brown, because the word percent means out of 100. Right, to go from 25 to 100, I'd have to multiply that denominator by 4. To make an equivalent fraction, if I multiply the denominator by 4, I have to multiply the numerator by 4. 14 times 4 is 56. So 56 out of 100 is 56%. So 56% of the chairs are brown. Let's look at our next example. Of the 400 animals at the zoo, 32 were monkeys. We want to know what percent were monkeys. Right? What percent were monkeys? Right? Were monkeys? Right? That question should be there. What percent were monkeys? So I start with my first ratio, 32 out of 400. I want to know 32 out of 400 is how many out of 100? Well, to go from 400 to 100, we have to divide by 4. If I have to divide the denominator by 4 to make an equivalent fraction, we have to divide the numerator by 4. 32 divided by 4 is 8. 8 out of 100 is the same as 8%. All right? We continue. If we want to express percents as fractions or decimals, first we take the percent, and because the word percent means out of 100, I take the percent and write it as a fraction over 100. So I take 24%. That's the same as 24 out of 100. Then I want to simplify that. To simplify 24 over 100, we can divide by 2 over 2. It's going to give me 12 over 50. 12 over 50 still is in simplest form because 12 and 50 have a common factor other than 1. Right? They're both even, so I can divide by 2 again. That's going to give me 6 out of 25. So 24% as a fraction in simplest form would be 6/25, or 6 out of 25. If I want to express 78% as a decimal, first I write the percent as a fraction. So that's going to be 78 over 100. And then, how do I write 78 over 100 as a decimal? I would write that as 78 hundredths, right? Because 78 hundredths is the same as 78 out of 100. All right? Now, there's another way to change percents to decimals, right? And I'll do that over here. If I start with 78%, right, I can change any percent to a decimal by dividing by 100, right? And that's what we did here, 78 divided by 100. But to divide by 100, I can put an imaginary decimal point in the back of the number and slide that imaginary decimal point 2 places left, right? Because each time I slide a decimal place left, I'm dividing by a power of 10. So sliding 2 places left, I'm dividing by 100, right? And I would also get 78 hundredths that way. All right? continue. Next slide. Let's do some guided practice here. 48% is the same as 48 out of 100. 48 out of 100 we have to simplify by dividing by, what can we divide by? Well, if I divide by 2 over 2, that's going to give me 24 out of 50. But 24 out of 50 can still be simplified because they're both even. So that's going to be 12 out of 25, fraction in simplest form. 55%. I write it as a fraction. So it's 55 out of 100 because the word percent means out of 100. We can divide by 5 over 5. 55 divided by 5 is 11. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 55% is the same as 11/20ths. How about 108%? First, as always, I write the percent over 100, right? Even if it's more than 100%, I still write it over 100. So 108 over 100. And then I simplify. Well, if I write it as a mixed number, 100 goes into 108 one times with 8 left over out of 100. So 1 and 8 100ths. I can simplify 1 and 8 100ths by dividing by 4, and that's going to give me 1 and 2 25ths. Okay? Next few examples. If I want to write this as a decimal, 13% is the same as 13 over 100. 13 over 100 is the same as 13 hundredths. Or I slide that imaginary decimal point 2 places left, right? That's going to give me 13 hundredths. 8% is our next example. I write that as 8 over 100. 8 over 100 is the same as 8 hundredths. Or I slide an imaginary decimal point 2 places left, and that's where I would get my 0.08 or 8 hundredths. 126%. I write it as a fraction. 126 over 100. That becomes 1 and my decimal point 26 hundredths. So 1.26 or 1 and 26 hundredths would be our answer, right, for number 8. We continue. Okay, I want to write 36% as a fraction. How do we do that? We write the percent over 100. So that's 36 over 100. I simplify 36 over 100. I can divide by 2 over 2. So that's going to be 18 out of 50. They're still both even, so I could divide by 2 over 2 again. It's going to give me 9/25ths. So we have 9/25ths is a fraction in simplest form for 36%. We'll try these problems here down at the bottom. Number 1, 1A. I want to write 55% as a fraction. I'd start with 55 over 100. I can divide by 5 over 5. 55 divided by 5 is 11. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 11/20ths would be the simplest form of 55%. 1B. Write 4% as a fraction. I'd write it as 4 over 100, right? I always put the percent over 100. 4 over 100 would simplify to 2 over 50, but they're still both even. So that's going to be 1/25th would be 4%. 2A. 25% is a decimal, right? 25 over 100. And 25 over 100 is the same as 25 hundredths. Or I slide that imaginary decimal point 2 places left. I get 0.25. Right, for 2B. 2% is a decimal. I start with 2 over 100. Right, I write it as a fraction first. 2 over 100 is the same as 2 hundredths. Or I slide that imaginary decimal point 2 places left, right, and I get 0.02. we continue. We want to express decimals as percents. All right, and here's a little example how to do it. Right, when we went from percent to decimal, we slid the decimal point 2 places right. Well, just the opposite is true then. If I want to go from percent or decimal to percent, I slide the decimal point 2 places right. It is the same as multiplying by 100. All right, so I take 700ths, I multiply by 100%, and I get 7%. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So if I express 82% or 82 hundredths as a percent, right, that's 82 hundredths is 82 out of 100, and 82 out of 100 is 82%. Or I slide that decimal point 2 places right. Right, that is the same as multiplying by, right, that's the same as 82 hundredths times 100%. Right, that's going to be 82%. Right, it works both ways. Okay, so if I want to express 4 hundredths as a percent, I'm going to slide that decimal point 2 places right. That is the same as multiplying by 100. All right, so that's going to give me 4%. What we did here was 0.04 times, right, 100%. And that's where we slide that decimal point 2 places right to get our 4%. 98 hundredths, I want to write it as a percent. Right, that's 98 out of 100. Right, 98 out of 100 is 98%. Right, I should have done this problem this way. Right, I would say that as 4 hundredths. Right, 4 hundredths is the same as 4%. Now, this is 6 tenths, but how many hundredths is it? Well, 6 tenths is 60 hundredths. 60 hundredths is the same as 60%. Or, I slide that decimal point 2 places right, because I'm multiplying by 100%, and that would give me 60%. Okay, so a little practice here. Right, if I have 7 hundredths times 100%, we slide that decimal point 2 places right, that's going to be 7%. Or I read it as 7 hundredths, which is 7 out of 100, which is 7%. We could do the problem either way, right? Either way works. 52 hundredths is the same as 52 over 100, which is 52%. Or we take 52 hundredths, we multiply by 100%, means we would slide that decimal point 2 places right. That's going to be 52%. I would say this decimal is 5 hundredths, so that's 5 out of 100. Right, which is 5%, not 50%. Or I take my 5 hundredths, multiply by 100%. It means I'd slide the decimal point 2 places right. That's going to give me 5%. This is 5 tenths, which is the same as 50 hundredths. Right, 50 hundredths is 50 out of 100. Which is 50%. Or I take my 5 tenths, I multiply by 100%, and that's going to give me 50%. All right, so we just practice and practice. So if I want to write a fraction as a percent, right, I have a couple of different options. Right, 6 out of every 25. 6 out of every 25, I make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Right, so that's going to be times 4. That's going to be times 4 in the numerator. That's 24 out of 100. 6 out of 25 is the same as 24 out of 100. So that's 24%. All right. Here, we have 1 out of every 20. I want to write that as a percent. 1 out of every 20. is the same as how many out of 100? Well, I have to multiply that 20 by 5 to get 100. So to make an equivalent fraction, we have to multiply that numerator by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. So 1 out of 20 is 5 out of 100, which is 5%. We find the percent represented by a fraction by multiplying by 100. Right? Not all denominators of fractions are multiples of 100. So we need another way to find equivalent percents. Right? So I can take a fraction, multiply by 100%, and then I do some long division. Right? So let's take a look at what that's going to look like. All right, so I have guided practice. I'm going to take 4/7. I'm going to multiply that by 100%. Right? And that 100% is over a 1. So that's going to be 400 over 7. 400 over 7. That is the same as 7 into 400. That's going to go, let's see, 6 times 7, 5 times 7 is 35. Subtract, I get 5, bring down the 0. 7 times 7 is 49. I subtract, I get 1. Right? So that is 57 and 1/7%. I take my remainder of 1, put it over my divisor of 7, and I get 57 and 1/7%. If I look at my second example, number 2, 1 5/9. All right, first I want to write it as a fraction. So that's 9 times 1 is 9 plus 5 is 14. So that's 14 over 9. Then I want to multiply that by 100%. Right? Put that over 1. 14 times 100 is 1400. So that's going to be 1400 over 9. I do a little long division. 9 into 1400. 9 goes into 14 one time. We subtract, I get 5, bring down the 0. 9 times 5 is what? 45. Subtract, I get 5, bring down the 0. 9 times 5 is 45. I subtract, I get 5. My remainder of 5, I put over my divisor of 9, and I get 155 and 5/9%. Okay, let's take 5/6. I'm going to recopy that down here. 5/6, I want to multiply that by 100%. Put that over 1. That becomes 500 over 6. I do a little long division here. 6 into 500. Right? To find the percent. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract, I get 2, bring down to 0. 3 times 6 is 18. Subtract, I get 2. That remainder of 2, I put over my divisor of 6, but I can simplify 2/6. So it's going to be 83 and 1/3% for 5/6. 1 7/8. Change it to a fraction first. 8 times 1 is 8, and 7 is 15. So that's going to give me 15 over 8. I want to multiply that by 100%. Put that over 1. It's going to be 1500 over 8, and that's going to be a percent. Do my long division. 8 into 1500. Right? Oops, wrong color. So 8 goes into 15 one time. 1 times 8 is 8. Subtract, I get 7. Bring down the 0. 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract, I get 6. Bring down the 0. 8 times 7, 56. Subtract, I get 4. My remainder of 4, I put over my divisor of 8. I can simplify 4 over 8. That becomes 1/2. So I get 187 and 1/2%. Right? So when I want to change a fraction with a denominator that's not a multiple of 10, or I want to be able to multiply by 100% and do a little long division. Okay, we're going to finish up with something like this, 33 1/3 percent. I want to write it as a fraction in simplest form. My first step, just like with every percent we've given, we want to write the percent as a fraction over 100. So this is going to be 33 1/3 over 100. My next step is to write 33 1/3 as a mixed number. So 3 times 33 is 99, plus 1 is 100. We want to write it as an improper fraction. It's already written as a mixed number. My mistake. So that's 100 over 3 over 100. It's called a complex fraction because I have a fraction within a fraction. But that is the same as 100 over 3 times, oops, let me not do that, not times yet, same as 100 over 3 divided by 100. That is the same as 100 over 3. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal, so that's times 1 over 100, right? Because that 100 is over 1. I divide out by 100. That's going to give me 1/3 as the fraction that is equivalent to 33 1/3 percent. All right. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of these to finish up. We want to express each as a percent or as a fraction in simplest form. Step 1, write it as a fraction with a denominator of 100. So that's 83 1/3 over 100. Next step, take the mixed number, write it as an improper fraction. 3 times 83, let's see, that's 3 times 80 is 240. 3 times 3 is 9, so that's 240 plus 1. That's going to be 250 over 3 over 100. I want to rewrite that complex fraction as 250 over 3 divided by 100. I'm going to put the 100 over 1. Now, to do this part, I have to multiply by the reciprocal. So it's 250 over 3 times 1 over 100. I divide out first by 10, and then I could divide out by 5, so that's going to be 2. That's going to be 5. And I multiply numerator times numerator. 5 times 1 is 5. Denominator times denominator. 3 times 2 is 6. 5 6 is the same as 83 1/3 percent. All right, we have 84.4%. All right, first, write it over 100. 84.4%. Oops. Let's redo that. It's 84.4 over 100. All right. Then I have to actually multiply this by 10 over 10, and that's going to give me 844 over 1,000. So I want to get rid of the decimal. So I get 844 over 1,000, and now I have to simplify 844 over 1,000. So 844 over 1,000, I could take half, so that's 422. 422 over 500. I could take half again, that's going to be 211 over half of 500 is 250. And I believe that's the fraction in simplest form. All right, so we went through a lot today. Right, you want to look back at each one of the slides, go step by step, right, and remember the processes, right? We want to go from fraction to decimal, decimal to percent, percent to fraction, right? We want to be able to go between all or among all three forms of those numbers. Okay, we're going to stop there, and I hope that has been helpful.